Hey everyone, welcome to the Unhandled Exception podcast. I'm Dan Clark and this is episode number 35. And today is going to be another group episode where I am joined by Paul Michaels and Kevin Smith, who both run the MiniHack events, which is something we're going to be talking about today. So before we dig into MiniHack, could you both give the listeners a quick intro into yourselves, and I will let you both fight over who goes first.
Go on, Kev.
I'll be polite and let Paul go first. All too polite.
All right, go on. Yeah, so I'm Paul Michaels. So I'm head of development at a company called Music Magpie. I'm a Microsoft MVP, and I'm sort of interested in mainly C# development, but pretty much anything that's cool and techie, I'm kind of involved in or interested in. Go on, Kev.
Cool, thanks. Yeah, so I'm Kev, obviously. I run lots of user groups, 2 user groups actually, but I help out with lots of other ones, I suppose. So I run .NET Chef and .NET York as well as the MiniHack, so quite ingrained in the community. I mostly work on C# and TypeScript, I'd say, these days, with like different cloud variations of like either AWS or Azure mostly. Quite happy to work on any kind of technical things, to be fair, because they're all kind of great to work on and interesting to use. But yeah, I work at a company called Excellence at the moment. We build law software for bereavement. And yeah, that's pretty much the summary about me.
Cool. Well, we can include a link to all those user groups and various things in the show notes as well. But before we dig into MiniHack, I'm just going to do this episode's listener mention. And this one goes to Shreyas Jejurka, who wrote a blog post listing his favourite 8 .NET podcasts. And what blew my mind was that within those 8, which also include podcasts that I'm a big fan of and avid listener of, the Unhandled Exception podcast was number 1. And he said, with this post, I will be sharing the list of podcast channels that you can consider listening to in order to keep up to date with .NET and related stuff. So thank you very much, Shreyas, for putting this podcast as number 1. It really did make my day, and I will include a link to that in the show notes. And if you want to get mentioned on the show, just send a tweet using hashtag #UnhandledException. All feedback is greatly appreciated. And I'm Dracan on Twitter, DRACAN. So, MiniHack. I'm guessing the listeners can perhaps work out what it is based on the name. But just in case, what is MiniHack?
So MiniHack was a sort of idea that I had about, year and a half, 2 years ago. Sort of a combination of things that I'd seen online and in person, and sort of born out of the fact that I've always liked the idea of going to a hackathon, but I'm far too old to be taking a sleeping bag down to somewhere and sleeping over for 2 days and all this kind of business. So I sort of suggested, I think publicly on Twitter, that this was an idea and see if anyone would be interested. And basically the idea is that we do a hackathon inside an hour and a half, 2 hours. And so I think Kev got back to me and said, yeah, interested in getting involved. So I sort of pitched the idea to him and he went, that's interesting. I don't think that'll work. You've not got enough time. And to be honest, I thought that myself. I mean, I was surprised when we did the first event and it worked and people actually produced something in 2 hours. And the stuff that gets produced is of a surprisingly high quality every time. And I was sort of thinking, best case is we'll get some half-finished projects and some, talk about what we kind of attempted. But no, we get some really interesting and high-quality ideas.
Yeah, what Paul said, like when we first got talking about it, I've been to quite a lot of like in-person hackathons, which are like 24 hours. And it's so hard in them to even produce something worth sharing. So I was always in the back of my mind, like, this is probably not going to work. We've got like 2 hours to produce something which is worthwhile showing. But I think half of it is like because it is also online and the engagement is a lot like kind of quicker, faster to get set up. People have their kind of machines ready to go. They're not trying to find people to pair with and kind of sit with and that kind of stuff as well. And the challenges are a bit like different compared to like a normal hackathon. Like if you're to a normal hackathon, you have lots of different challenges. You can submit your project for multiple and can win multiple prizes. As we try to kind of have a different edge. Yeah, I think from kicking off, it kind of went pretty well, I think.
For the listeners, last August, I was quite honoured to be asked to be a guest judge on MiniHack, so I attended one of the events, and the format of .NET Oxford, the user group I run, is very talk-based, so it's someone coming up doing a talk. So it's a very one-way thing. And I really enjoyed the interactive nature of the MiniHack events. They were using Zoom, so I don't know whether that's what you still use, but the breakout rooms worked so well. And I enjoyed, as a judge, jumping into each of the rooms and just chatting with the attendees to see how each team is going.
I suppose for context, because I think the one thing that we didn't cover on when you said what is MiniHack is actually how it works at the minute. And it is the result of trial and error. But basically, everybody jumps on Zoom. We allocate teams beforehand. We try and keep it through, again, result of trial and error. We try and keep it as small as possible. So 3 or 4 as a maximum is ideal. Anything more than that, we find that you end up with one person who basically does all the work and 5 people sat around watching. And 2 people kind of works, but it's a bit of a challenge to get everything done. I think we've decided on sort of 3 or 4 as a sweet spot. We put them all into separate rooms in Zoom, and then we just kind of drift around from room to room and check everyone's kind of all right. They have a go at the task, which is typically a sort of vaguely open-ended task, and probably getting a bit more to some of the things that we've actually challenged people to do. And then they'll present something at the end to the judge. And originally, I think when I did it, I had this idea of we'd allocate a certain number of points for this, a certain number of points for that, whatever. And that basically got thrown out of the first event we did, because the judge on that, he just had a look and he went, "That's the winner," because it's, I think I'm quoting almost verbatim, and he went, "It's so wonderfully pointless." I was like, "That's brilliant."
Well, I really enjoyed the one I attended where I was the guest judge. The topic was stories. The description was, you need to tell a story using the most diverse and imaginative technology you can. There should be some element of interactivity to the story. So, and the winner I chose was actually, they did a Hungry Caterpillar game. So that brought back lots of memories from when my kids were a bit young and I used to read to them. But that was good fun.
Yeah, I think a lot of the challenges that we had have been quite, even though Paul comes up with the abstract for the kind of challenge beforehand, and I kind of look over it, it's much more better that coming with stories and the storyline for them all. But a lot of people just go off like topic completely, which is quite good and quite interesting, I find. So even though we kind of prescribe kind of what we think people would start building, for example, we did a one which was a travel booking system, and we created like a API which was just going to break all the time, and we wanted them to kind of like deal with the scenario of it, the kind of API breaking, and deal with that kind of scenario kind of thing. But what happened was everybody just built like quirky kind of date pickers instead of how to pick a date within a certain range. Instead of kind of like dealing with the problem with the API being quirky, they just made a front end which was just as quirky as the API, which was just hilarious, I thought.
Or was that the one where it was like it spun round or something? One of them, it spun round or something and selected a date at random, and then if it failed, it spun round again. And so what typically happens is I'll sort of have a think and I'll come up with something. I'll send it to Kevin. Having a second pair of eyes works because he'll sort of look at it. And the other day I sent something through and he's like, "Man, it's too, you've got it too prescriptive. You need to open it up a bit." And there's a few of them where it works much better having a second pair of eyes. And then we do that and we have an idea. So in our heads, it's going to be like we did one with maps. You had to get from point A to point B on the map, but avoid certain parts, and the parts would change. So I thought, right, I'll check, how hard is it to set up Google sort of interface to the maps and so on, because everyone will do that. And then the teams that were there, none of them did that. What they all did was write their own map generator. Like actually in the hack, they all did the same thing, which amazed me. But it was not what we thought was going to happen.
With all these different hackathon events you've done, there must be so many different stories about things that have gone wrong, or just like you just said, not quite what you expected to happen.
Yeah, I mean, I think the only thing we know is that whatever we think they're going to produce, they don't produce. The only time we managed to get something that we expected, we came up with an idea where we would force an IoT thing. So I spoke to Pete Gallagher, who's like well into IoT and stuff, and I said, "Will you come and do judge?" And we thought, well, we'll try and force it to be an IoT thing. And we came up with this contrived idea where, I can't remember exactly, something like you're imprisoned and you have to produce something physically that can be gotten out and given to somebody so that they can come and rescue you. You have to give them a message or something. So we sort of contrived it such that it was absolutely had to be an IoT device. And then Pete came on and gave a 5-10 minute, this is how you use these sites that sort of represent the IoT. That was the only time where we've actually done something and what we got out was what we thought we'd get out. Every other time it's been different. And sometimes it's, some of the stuff that gets produced, you would never ever, whatever you thought. I mean, one time we tried to do OWASP, wasn't there? And I think we said something about you've got a right of vulnerability, and everybody just completely swerved the thing. And like, I think we come back to OWASP about 3 times. And I think the 3rd time we said, right, you must have something that's in the top 10. I think we managed to get some stuff then. But yeah, otherwise it's just like, and to be fair, that's kind of the spirit of it. It's all a bit like just whatever's quirky and whatever is kind of funny and gets a laugh or whatever.
It's not like it's suddenly going to production or anything. It's just about teamwork and people having fun, really. If they're doing it in the evening, then it's about people getting together and having fun coding together, isn't it?
Yeah, we're not wanting people to stress out that they have to get something finished by like in 2 hours. And that's one of the things what we mentioned at the start as well. Like, it's just a kind of bit of fun to kind of get together, meet some people, hack some code together. And a lot of the time, like, people just use smokes and mirrors for some certain things as well. So it doesn't always have to fully work. And people openly say that at the end of what they've produced is like, either this bit is working, but this other thing we're just completely ignoring. They sometimes even win because the actual judge likes the idea of that, not even just the implemented concept. So even if like you're not a kind of software engineer and just somebody in product, for example, you could even kind of come along and kind of contribute to a team of like ideas and things like that as well. Quite a few people have not actually come from direct software engineering backgrounds. Like the one who's on the top of the leaderboard doesn't even work in software development, but he's just got a hobby for it and just enjoys turning up, hacking some stuff together for people, and yeah, just enjoys coding. So we don't want it to be like a stressful environment. We want people to kind of just open up and play around, learn new things, and also share back to people. Because I think a lot of people have, well, me personally, I've learned quite a lot of like different tools, libraries, UI things, what people have shown off at the end, such as, well, one of the things what people have used regularly is like the browser APIs for voice recognitions inside the browser. So the browser actually already has like some voice recognition APIs, and you can just hook into them. And it also has some speech APIs as well. You can hook into them as well. And I didn't even know they existed, to be fair, until somebody like showed them off, and I was like, oh, that's quite cool. You just kind of expanding your knowledge by people just playing around.
In fairness, I didn't know about that either until just now.
Until somebody says, like, try and do this, which you never... I can't imagine a line of business out where they go, we need a website that recognises someone's voice. You'd be like, what are you talking about? Of course you don't. Some of the stuff as well, like we had, what was one where we said, record a sound or something, but not actually by recording the sound. And one of the teams, the guy that Kev was talking about, he's a linguist, I think, and he converted the sound into, I think it was Japanese characters, was it? And then stored the Japanese characters and then fed it back. Stuff like that is really surprising. And what Kev said is right. We're actively trying to encourage people who don't have a software development background, because I think that works both ways. So it encourages people to come into the industry and sort of, I suppose, find some interest in programming, but also it works the other way. Whereas if you've got someone who they're not a programmer, maybe they work in the industry, maybe they don't, they're going to have different ideas than people who go, oh, you can't do that, because I've been working in this industry for 20 years and I know that's, intrinsically you sort of, there's certain things you won't bother trying because you had your nose bloodied too much. So having the people who don't have that bloody nose to say, well, actually, yeah, let's try this, let's try that. And,
when you sit in with teams and just watch what they're doing and question things, like the amount of times where I've jumped onto it at the start and like they've been bouncing around ideas and somebody would be like, oh, wouldn't it be great if we could do X, Y, Z? And then somebody else is just like, oh yeah, that'd probably take 5 minutes. And they just literally just throw something together in 10 minutes. And it's just like, there you go. And the other person's like, okay, didn't know that was possible. And it's just like them kind of things where people have just got an idea, but think it's going to be like super complicated. And then the other person's just like, no, there's a library for that. Here you go.
If you jump into one of the teams and that's happening, but there isn't someone on the team that knows you can do that in 5 minutes, and you know that you can do this in 5 minutes, do you give them a hint or do you restrain yourself and keep quiet?
I try to help them along, to be fair. I've kind of helped code in languages that I don't even know as well, which is funny. So one of the other things is it's like completely language agnostic as well. So we don't expect them to all be C# developers or all be Java developers. People come with the kind of the tools, what they know, and just kind of try to do the best they can. I think was it Go? I think it was. There was a team doing some stuff in Go, and there was questioning about kind of how to like load files off disks and stuff like that. And I was just like, I have no idea, but I could try to help out. So kind of sat in with the team trying to help them out for a bit with kind of writing some Go. And yeah, got them over the line so they could do the next bit. And I think that's quite a good thing. But one thing that I tried personally not to do is like try to tell them what the other team's doing. So try to be quite agnostic be biased towards certain teams, even though we're not judging. You don't want to be saying like, oh, team A over there is doing X, Y, Z, and just see what they come up with themselves.
Yeah, apart from anything, you don't want the same thing being produced. I mean, I think we're quite lucky in that we've only ended up with one situation where the exact same solution was found, completely independently, but exact same solution was found to the same problem. But yeah, just to echo what Kev said about language agnostic, we're also tech agnostic. I always try and have some suggestions. Nobody ever follows the suggestions, but I always try and include one that doesn't involve programming at all. So, use of an Excel spreadsheet is fine. Or, if you want to build an IoT robot instead of writing any code, or if you've got Lego, or obviously it depends on what the problem is. But the thing is, if you can display it over Zoom, then that's fine. It doesn't have to be a computer program.
One of the items in the notes about interesting stories, you put hack one spreadsheet. Was that what you were referring to then?
It was. I don't think it's the only time that a spreadsheet has ever been used as a solution, but this was remarkable because the problem was basically we gave them some jigsaw pieces, which incidentally took me ages to make. I mean, I don't know if you know this, but it's possible to make jigsaw pieces in PowerPoint. I found this blog post to do it. Kind of a tangent, but it's really a pain to do that, and I thought it'd be a lot easier. So I got this image, an open source image off the internet, and then basically turned it into 6 jigsaw pieces or something. And effectively, the task was just do something cool with this. So one of the teams got Excel and rendered that image using the cells in Excel as pixels. So each cell was a slightly different color. And then when you zoomed out, it would show the image and patch the jigsaw pieces together in Excel, which I suppose now I'm describing it, it sounds a bit mundane, but there was millions of cells in use here. And this was coincidentally at the same time when the government was being, they just found out that the 16,000 rows or whatever was a limit that could be used or whatever. And yeah, 20 minutes to an hour, and these guys had a spreadsheet using millions of rows to display an image. So I think it's probably my favourite hack, partly because it was the first one, but also because it didn't use any code and it was just really cool the way it was done.
Yeah, I think that with it being the first hack, going back to like kind of the examples what we thought they'd produce, like in my mind it was just like, oh, jigsaw pieces, they're either going to create an application which is going to automatically solve it, they're just shuffling the jigsaw pieces and it can just solve the puzzle itself. Or somebody's going to create a drag drop kind of UI or something where they can play the jigsaw and actually manually like kind of put the jigsaw together. And we didn't get either of them solutions, did we, if I remember right?
Yeah.
Like we just got an Excel sheet, and I can't remember what the other ones were. But
I don't know if one of the other ones did something where it did try and have I think they use React or something to see you can move the pieces around. We ask everyone to check the coding anyway, so we could probably check that. Not that everybody does every time, but we'd probably get 60 or 70% of the coding.
Yeah, I was going to say, looking a bit earlier at your GitHub page, it looks like you've got one GitHub repository with the code for each of the different hacks. So I'll definitely include a link to that in the show notes. So have you actually had any with, you saying you're language agnostic, so each team can pick their language and technology. Have you ever had any arguments within the same team? Like one team member wants to do it one way, another team member wants to do it another way?
No, I think I've had problems where people want to do a certain language, but then they default back to using JavaScript. So we've had I think it's mainly like Python/C#/JavaScript. And I think all the commonalities between all the languages is everybody's a JavaScript developer. So everybody usually ends up falling back into JavaScript. But a lot of people are quite willing to kind of just Google things and get things done. Because a lot of the time, like I think, well, even like in my day job, we just kind of like Google things and then piecemeal things together, don't you? Just to try to get things working. And for like a mini hack, I don't think you go back and refactor things as much as you would in kind of real life. But I think that's part of the fun.
Or at all. It's like it's not red, green, refactor. It's just green. Does it work? Yes. There you go. Publish.
red, green. Yeah, so I don't think there's ever been any kind of conflict in people saying like, oh, I only want to do C# and I only want to do Python and we're not going to work well on a team. We do try to put people together based on like kind of their skill sets. And that was one of the things we did a lot of discussion up front before we started about the mini hack stuff. We want to kind of be encouraged as possible. So if you want to come along with a friend or a couple of people who you've worked with before to make you feel more comfortable, you should be able to just do that. We should be able to say like them 3 people, they want to be on the team on their own, let them be on the team on their own. And a couple of people have been like that because it's more comforting. It's less a barrier to entry for them. And you get that exactly the same at like kind of normal hackathons. So the ones that I've been to, you either kind of submit a team beforehand, or if you want to, you could just turn up on the day and find other team members who are similar to you, or kind of whatever. These days use like Slack and stuff like that to communicate first. But you kind of put out there saying like, oh, I'm C#, I want to build some APIs and etc. And other people will kind of like message you saying like, oh, I fancy that too. And you'll kind of get together and have a chat and see if you're compatible and then go for it. But I think because this is a lot shorter, we kind of try to bring that up front to ask them questions. So on the meetup site, we've got like a Google form to just ask them a few questions of kind of if they want to be in a like kind of team, what they've already dedicated themselves to, or kind of their preferences on kind of technology choices. And we try to put the people into kind of groups where they want to fit. So I think there's some questions on there, which is like your primary kind of like language, what you want to choose. And then we also have, you'll be comfortable with like maybe Python, other languages and stuff like that. And also if they want to kind of lead up a team as well. So within a team, you always have to have somebody kind of who's more willing to kind of go out of their way and kind of like, not kind of manage, but kind of more coordinate the team. So not to kind of take control, but kind of coordinate what's going on. We try to kind of ask if somebody would prefer doing that or not prefer doing that, because obviously some people are kind of averse from doing them kind of things, and some people strive to do them things. So we try to mix them people together, so then we don't have just a team which is all just silent, or a team which is always trying to step on each other kind of thing. Well, that's kind of a bit more pre-planning of the actual event and who's actually going.
Do you find that with the different personalities, at the end of the hackathon when it's presentation time, do teams tend to just have one person that does the presentation, or do you quite often get them sharing, doing the presentation?
We have had sharing in the past, but from what Kevin was saying about the team lead, I suppose, the absolute main function of the team lead is we need at least one person who's prepared to present. So if we end up with more than one person who's prepared to present, then that's fine. We at least need one person who's not too shy to say, here's my screen, this is what we've made type of thing. But I think we have had a couple of situations where they've either shown, especially code, so on the odd occasion that we've had people who haven't completed stuff, they've kind of split and said, oh, I did this bit type of thing. And it's not very often we find it, but every so often you'll end up with the thing where they kind of both go off on the merry way, come back, and it just doesn't really slot together.
What's the most obscure? We've mentioned about JavaScript being the most popular, but what's the most obscure language you've had someone do other than Excel macros?
Well, I don't want to say something like Go because that's not really obscure, is it? But
I think that's the most uncommon one we've had, I think, is Go.
We get Python quite a bit. We get JavaScript quite a bit. We've had, I think at one point, I think on that story thing that you mentioned, Dan, I think somebody used it wasn't a language, it was like some kind of game generator, online game generator or something like that.
Oh, yes. Yeah, I remember that. It was some kind of online UI where you could generate a workflow.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, I'd love to be able to come up with a way where we can say, right, for this task, you've got to use like Hook or, one of the other esoteric languages or something, but I've not been able to come up with a way that squares with it being language agnostic, because I'd love to see bizarre languages being used and people just playing about with stuff. But yeah, I've not come up with a good way of doing that yet.
What's that language? Which, if I said out loud, I'd have to beep it out. Brain something.
Brain, yeah. I was gonna say it then, and I thought you have to beat me out as well.
Oh, that's quite funny.
That's the one where it's all, is it pluses and semicolons
Chevrons.
and chevrons? Yeah.
It's a bit crazy. I think that would probably be a bit harsh on your attendees if you insist everyone had to do that one. I'm going to include a link to that one in the show notes so the listeners know what we're talking about. I'll have to bleep out the show notes too.
Yeah, I was going to say, if that doesn't make any sense, you might as well just say it.
I did get some Microsoft swag at one of the conferences last year, I think it was, which actually had like a drinks canister with that language written on it. I did question myself, like thinking, like, does the marketing people actually know what this is?
Oh, that's quite funny. So with the various guests you've had on, ignoring me, I don't know why you asked me on, but I appreciate it. But looking through the list, you've had some very cool guests, like people like John Skeet and things like that. Could we talk about the different guests? I did actually see that your tweet recently got Handsome as well.
Yeah, and I don't know whether I should say this, he's provisionally accepted, I think. So I'm hoping to get him on in a month or two. I've been quite surprised, actually, because I thought, there's a lot of busy people out there, and we're not specifically looking for anyone, but then it's nice to have people who are prominent in the community. So, that's why we asked you, Dan, because obviously you're prominent in the community. But people like John Skeet, I was surprised when I got in touch with him and he went, yeah, I can do it. And then he just turned up. I think the first one we got Martin Beebe to do it, and he was really good about it. In fact, he provided the prize on the first tack, so we hadn't sorted out a prize. We hadn't got a sponsor or anything, and I think he gave the winning team like 100 quid's worth of Amazon vouchers each.
Oh, nice.
Not Amazon, like Amazon AWS vouchers, not Amazon.
Oh, I see.
It sounded a bit better than it was. And then who else have we had, Kev? We had Pete, who I've mentioned.
We've had one of the co-authors of the OWASP Top 10, Daniel, I think.
He was quite surprised because somebody managed to produce a SQL injection vulnerability on purpose. And he was saying that is a hard feat these days because there's a lot of clever people who go out of their way to make sure you can't do that by accident. And they managed to intentionally do it. So
good old Bobby Tables.
Yeah. And then who else have we? Oh, we had Dave Thomas, author of The Pragmatic Programmer. So he joined. He was quite interested in it, actually. The good thing about this is you get all these people on who are sort of really clever, prominent people, and then while the hack's going on, you get half an hour chat with them to say, how's things going and so on, and it's great. And people are willing to give up the time and are always genuinely surprised, like pleasantly surprised about what gets produced. I mean, whatever you say, programming is hard, and programming something that actually works in like an hour and a half is a feat one way or the other. So, and if you manage to do the thing without programming, that's even better. I mean, if you can produce something like an Excel spreadsheet or a Word document with a macro or something that does whatever, that's got to be noteworthy.
So obviously MiniHack is a virtual event. Is there any plans for this to become in person at all, or will it always be a virtual event?
So we've had a think about doing some in-person events. I mean, the context for this was that we were in the middle of coronavirus and we wanted to start something during coronavirus. That wasn't the reason for starting it, but during coronavirus, kind of didn't get a choice. Being virtual gives us a lot of options. So, as Kev's just pointed out, the 0 to 60 in online is faster. We've had conversations, haven't we, Kev, about whether we'd run an in-person event, maybe off the back of potentially a DDD event or something like that. So have a room and try it in person. But I don't think it'd work if we were to say, this week we're going to be in Sheffield or Manchester or Nottingham or something, or wherever, Oxford, because apart from anything, we won't be able to travel. Like the travelling would be too much. But I don't know if we'd be able to get enough people to turn up for an hour and a half or 2 hours. It's just too much of a commitment for that length of time. So I think online mostly works better. Would you agree, Kev?
Yeah, I think like compared to other hackathons, they're very kind of like scheduled 6 months, a year in advance. People dedicate time to them. People book hotels. All sorts of stuff goes into it. Ours is kind of more ad hoc, like short amount of time frame. Like Paul said, if we did do something in person, I think the bestest way for us to approach it would probably to prepare it with like some kind of DDD event, like a pre-conference day event, like a lot of other kind of conferences do. So one of what just recently got announced today is SteelCon, and they do like a pre-conference day for kind of other like workshops and bits and bobs and stuff like that. And I think this would suit pretty well for the one like a pre-conference day thing, where people who are traveling down early and kind of spare that kind of evening, they could do that for 2 hours and things like that. And it gives people to do something in that evening when they've traveled down earlier because they had to stay overnight and things like that. And I think that was where it probably would fit quite well, I think, because it is all the people for the conference who are traveling down there and they're already invested in doing something else. So having 2 hours to just hack around, kind of meet some new friends and that kind of thing would go down well, I think. But it's one of the things that we've talked about, not really kind of plan much of, but just keep spiking that idea like, maybe this could work.
To be fair, we're only just coming out, well, I say coming out in inverted commas, coming out of coronavirus now. So there's not been that many opportunities, has there?
No. I think it spiked the conversation the other day when we were talking about the DD Southwest, I think it was.
Yeah.
Because they've just recently opened for papers. I know it was just like, we could probably do something before that day.
It definitely feels like something that could be done. I think it would have to piggyback on a big event because I don't think at a regional thing you'd get enough people to turn up for it. And there's a price to pay for turning up in person as well. If you turn up in person, you've got to have everything with you. You know, if you turn up for a .NET Chef, for example, a Plug Kev's thing that he organises, you just turn up. You can turn up just you. You don't need a laptop. You don't need anything. You can just turn up and watch the talk and go to the pub after and go home. You can't do that here. You've got to have your own laptop. You've got to have some kind of setup, so on and so forth. I mean, I'm not saying you need a big setup, but at least we know that when somebody connects to our meetup that they've got some of that in place.
Yeah, even like things like internet, as soon as they joined on Zoom, you know they actually have internet which is working and okay to kind of work with. As if you're in person, either you supply the internet or they have to like tether off their phones if they've got enough data. That also creates another barrier to entry. Like people have connected to the group before just on their iPads and just kind of stuff on their iPads with like VS Code in the browser and stuff like that using LiveShare. And that's all possible because it's quite easy to do when you're at home. So I think the barrier to entry is a lot lower and it doesn't cost you anything as well. As if you start like traveling in person, you start making the barrier to entry a lot higher for people to kind of get there. You're just limiting the pool of people you can attract as well. But I think it has like two sides on it really. Like Paul said, like there's good things about having things in person, but also there's also downsides as well. So
I think that's it. We've had this discussion a few times with .NET Oxford because when it started, I think it was about 5 years ago, it was always an in-person event in Oxford. And then obviously when lockdown hit, we went virtual and it's been virtual ever since. And we're planning July is going to be our first in-person event again. And that's just a lightning talk event. So we're kind of like getting that sorted at the moment. But it's like you said, it's kind of like you're limiting how many people can attend. And then when it was in person originally, then all of our members were local, they could commute. Then it became virtual, and suddenly we had a lot more members across the globe, not just in the UK. We've got people from other countries attending. And by going back to being in person, we're suddenly excluding a lot of people. So we're always going to have some form of virtual presence just to not exclude those people. So whether we do like Twitch streaming or some kind of streaming from the physical venue, it's a tricky one, really.
It's interesting how the whole landscape's changed. I mean, you know, as you've just alluded to, there's that side of it. The other side of it is that I don't think it is physically possible to attend. I mean, there's literally a meetup now every day online, and that's just the ones in Britain. So there's also the ones in America and so on. It used to be you pretty much were restricted to the one that was local to you. I mean, so there's good sides and bad sides to that, but I think it's a different landscape, and I imagine what's going to happen is that some groups will go back entirely in person, and some will try hybrid, and some will just go online completely. And
what we've done for .NET Chef and .NET York, so Sheffield one has had about 4 or 5 in-person ones now. The York one's had 2. The Sheffield attendance in person has dropped by about like 50% or more, I think. Well, we used to get like about 35 people turn up, and now we're getting around like 12. Well, 8 to 12 people, 8 to 15, sorry, people. But the people there, we've literally done like a poll when I was there, say, does people want to keep continuing doing in-person ones? And everybody's like, yes, we want to come in person. And then people are quite dedicated to kind of even travel from home after being in their own home office and come in and meet people. It depends on your kind of like, I guess, your environment, what you're working in, how far you have to travel. A lot of people used to just work straight from their offices, straight to the venue, have a talk, have some pizza, have another talk, and then go to the pub. As now, I think you need to be a bit more dedicated of like, oh, I finished work at 5:30. I now need to go commute into the city to go to this meetup, which is a bit different from how it previously was. But we've been getting quite good feedback about like kind of keep things in person as well as online. So we've been trying to not do like a hybrid approach of streaming it online, but we're just continuing recording things and just uploading them to YouTube afterwards. So if people do want that content, they can still get it on YouTube, but we're not going to do like a hybrid approach of having it streamed, because we think the disconnect on kind of like questions and kind of how you respond to people is completely different from in person to like kind of an online presence. So we're trying to keep online ones online, in-person ones in person, and just kind of like publish the content for the in-person ones. So at least there is content for people out there if they need it. But that's kind of our approach so far, and that's been working fairly well.
Have you ever recorded any of the MiniHack events?
We record the finale, as to say. So when people are kind of showing off to the judge of what they produced, but we've never recorded like people working.
we record, it's going to sound a bit strange this, but we record the finale for our own benefit. So there's 2 things that we record it for. The first one is so we can remember who won and who was in that team, because that is a bigger challenge than it seems when you're not actually thinking about that, and then suddenly we have to remember, because we've got sponsors now, so the winning team wins quite a generous sponsorship thing. So the winning team basically gets £25 voucher for just each. So we have to remember that, which I don't think either of us are particularly good at remembering stuff. But the other one is we wanted to start doing some promo videos, and I think the first one our sponsor produced. For as a second one, I kind of managed to cobble together myself with my limited knowledge of Camtasia. I think I posted that recently. But yeah, so that's kind of the reason we're recording, and we don't sort of publish them to YouTube or whatever, or have a channel. Maybe we should, I don't know.
That would be really interesting to see if it was published. But I guess then it's the whole permission thing, and if people are uncomfortable presenting, they would probably be more uncomfortable if they knew it was going on YouTube.
I think that would create a big barrier to entry. If it's effectively asking them to live stream on like Twitch or anything in it. So I think that would be a big thing for people. So yeah, I suspect we probably aren't going to do that. But yeah, the M bit we do record, but just kind of for our own benefit, and so we can remember stuff and produce our videos. And we when we do them videos, we keep people out of it really. So it's just kind of what they produce, and quite often we found out the other day that Zoom only keeps the recordings for a certain period of time. I think we get
yeah. Because I was sharing the links directly to everybody, and then it's just like, oh, they disappeared.
Yeah.
Retention rates.
Have you actually lost them, or did you have a backups?
No, we lost some, and then I think I don't know if we've like actually adapted our process there, because to be fair, we don't need them recordings as such. We only use it for, so everything that we need it for, we've already done at that point. It was just, I wanted to make a video. I think it was for the MVP Summit. I wanted to make a video for the MVP Summit. So I did, and that was the one that I posted on LinkedIn recently. In fact, I could probably fish you out a link to it if you want to put that in the notes, Dan.
Yeah, that'd be great. So before we move on to dev picks, is there anything else you want to mention?
Yep, so both me and Kev are actively involved in writing books in one way or another at the minute. So I should have my latest book published sometime this month, which is a book about my experiences with software architecture. And I think Kev, you've done some. Bloody hell, I've forgotten how to speak.
Yeah, so I got involved like doing some kind of videoing work for books. So like originally I was doing some Mongo tutorials in video format of just walking through kind of exercises which relate back to a book. And then I got paused, and now I'm actually doing technical reviewing on a Mastering MongoDB 5 book. So that's currently what I'm working on as well, in the kind of book world of software anyway, which is going pretty well so far.
Cool. So shall we do dev picks? Who wants to go first?
Yep, go on. So mine is a site that a guy called Lee Engelston set up, Tech Community Calendar. I'll send you a link, or I think I've already sent you a link, techcommunitycalendar.com. He basically lists all the things that happen in the tech community there, and MiniHack's on there, but other things are as well. And I think that's like a little gap in the market that he's plugged.
Cool. Yeah, we'll definitely link to that one.
I haven't got any content to kind of push people towards, but one of the things what I have noticed in the industry recently is, well, it's been happening quite a while. We always try to push things more to the left, and like testing has been like a major thing within the past few years of us as software developers pushing everything to the left. So automating as much testing as possible from kind of our integration testing, unit testing, like end-to-end testing. But there's now like a bigger trend to kind of push more of the infrastructure onto devs as well, which I found quite interesting. And me personally being having experience and being interested in kind of all the infrastructure side and things as well, it's quite good. I think you had a talk recently on Pulumi. That's one of the projects which has been pushing kind of boundaries of kind of getting devs to actually do the infrastructure and pushing it more to the left. And there's other projects on the go as well, like AWS has started the kind of AWS CTK, so you can actually write infrastructure as code in pretty much any language, including C#, Python, TypeScript, etc. And now, since they've done it as well, Terraform has done the Terraform CDK as well. I find it quite an interesting kind of time for kind of things moving more to the left, which began with like more of testing a few years ago, and now is into the infrastructure side. So I don't know what's going to be next, but it's just a thing which is on the horizon, I see.
I thought you were going to try and define DevOps at some point then as well.
I don't want to get in any conversations about DevOps. Unless it's a practice and way of working, I'm all game for that.
Yeah, I find it interesting it happens both ways as well, though, because as you say, the infrastructure stuff and the infrastructure as code and stuff is being more pushed to the left, but also things like I'm seeing more and more operations teams using things like Git and source control and having to learn that kind of stuff. And I think especially with the cloud becoming so popular now, then I think more and more stuff is just naturally going down that route where you can just automate all the things. And then when you've got things like you've got to have disaster recovery and you need to spin up whole environments quickly in the cloud, everything's got to be automatable and repeatable. Hopefully, in an ideal world. I know a lot of companies don't do that, but ideally, that's what people should strive for, I guess. So my dev pick is a GitHub page called .NET Content Creators, which was created quite recently by a guy called Matthias Jost. And this is a list of .NET content creators across the globe. And this includes podcasters, bloggers, YouTubers, book authors, Pluralsight authors. So it's a really useful resource, and it's been getting quite a bit of traction on Twitter recently. So as usual, I'll include a link to that in the show notes. So before we wrap up, where's the best place for listeners to reach out to you if they have any questions or to find out more about MiniHack?
So you can go onto the MiniHack website, which is onlineminihack.github.io. Again, I'll send you a link, and you can link to it if you want. We've also got a GitHub page, which I think probably worth putting that in. And me personally, Paul_Michaels on Twitter. Kev, you're also on Twitter, aren't you?
Yeah, I think for me, Twitter's probably the best place to get in contact, which is just Kev_Byte. I have no idea why I still have that name, which I created when I was like 12 or 13, but it's come a long way. I tried to move it to my kevsoft.net domain and all that kind of cool stuff, but then I just gave up after a while and just fell back to still using my old school stuff. So yeah, Kev_Byte. It's probably the best way on Twitter.
I've been meaning to ask you where Byte came from.
Yeah, I actually can't really remember. I think it was when I was younger and I couldn't spell bite with B-Y-T-E. So I ended up spelling it B-I-T-E, and then it just kind of stuck, and then I just like left it. And when you try to transition, because my email address is the same as well, and I tried to transition it over to using like kevin@kevsoft.net, which I've had for years as well. And like just changing all your stuff for your email just takes forever. So I just gave up, and I was just like, I'll just leave it as all my old school stuff. It gets enough spam anyway, so I don't mind handing it out to as many people as possible as well.
Well, it's the same with my Draken username in Twitter. I just made up the name years and years and years ago, like for like Duke Nukem and Quake games, and it was just like a play on the words dragon. I changed it to Draken, and that's kind of, as you say, it's just stuck.
Yeah.
It's only 6 letters, so it's kind of useful for my Twitter. It's not worth changing it really, because obviously Dan Clark is taken.
Yeah. People should warn 12-year-old kids to, be careful about what you do online when you're 12, because you'll still be doing that same thing. You still have to live with that same thing when you're like 35, 40.
Awesome. Well, thank you both for joining us. When I was a guest on the show, I think I said to you at the end, I've really got to attend one of these and actually join in with the hackathon. And I haven't done, so I need to make sure I do that. I might join the Scott Hanselman one when he does that. Cool, and thank you everyone else for listening. So a quick reminder that this podcast is sponsored by Everstack, which is my own company providing software development and consultation services. For more information, visit everstack.com. And if you're enjoying the podcast, please do help me spread the word on social media. I normally use the hashtag unhandledexception, and I can be found on Twitter @Drakan, which now you know what that means. My DMs are open, and my blog danclark.com has links to all my social stuff too. And as usual, we will include links to all the things we've mentioned today in the show notes, which can be found on unhandledexceptionpodcast.com.